This title is narrated with virtual voice. Computer-generated narration for audiobooks. The Holly Crown of Maidstone by Keiran Berry. Chapter 1. The Red Ribbon. Keiran Berry hadn't planned to come home for Christmas. Maidstone was all winding lanes and half-lit pubs, the kind of place where queer boys like him learned to disappear. He'd spent the last 2 years in Brighton, wrapped in drag shows and late-night poetry readings, building a life stitched from glitter and grief. But Charlotte had begged. "Just for a few days," she'd said, voice trembling over the phone. "Something's wrong with Mum. She keeps talking to the fireplace." So here he was, boots crunching through the frost-bitten garden, the old house looming like a mausoleum behind him. The holly bush by the gate had grown wild, its berries swollen and glistening like drops of blood. He paused, brushing snow from a branch. One berry pulsed beneath his fingers. He pulled back. Inside, the house was colder than the air. The radiators were off. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, undecorated, its needles already browning. Charlotte sat curled on the sofa, her blonde hair damp with snow, eyes wide and rimmed with sleeplessness. "She's in the attic," she whispered. "She says the Holly King is coming." Keiran blinked. "The what?" Charlotte didn't answer. She just handed him a red ribbon, frayed and damp. "I found this in the woods, tied to a tree. There were footprints, bare feet, and singing." He turned the ribbon over in his hand. It smelled faintly of iron. From upstairs, a creak. Then a voice, low and lilting, musical notes, emoji. "Gather round the holly crown, the blood shall bloom, the king shall drown." Musical notes, emoji. Keiran froze. "That's not Mum." Charlotte nodded. "She hasn't spoken in days, not like herself. She just hums. And she keeps lighting candles. Red ones, even in the bath." Keiran stepped toward the staircase. "Did you call anyone?" Charlotte shook her head. "I tried. The phones don't work, and the Wi-Fi is gone. I think the house doesn't want us to leave." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "That's ridiculous." But when he turned to the front door, it was gone. Not locked, not jammed, gone. Just wallpaper where the frame had been. Charlotte didn't scream. She just stood, walked to the fireplace, and knelt. She said it would bloom tonight. That the crown needs a king. Keiran's heart thudded. "What crown?" Charlotte looked up, her eyes glassy. "The one they buried in the woods. The one that only grows when someone's been forgotten." Outside, the wind howled. Snow began to fall harder, thick and wet. The holly bush at the gate twitched, its branches reaching. Keiran stepped back. "We need to leave. Through a window. Through anything." But Charlotte was already lighting a candle. Red wax dripped onto her wrist. She didn't flinch. "Mum said you were chosen," she whispered. "Because you left. Because you broke the circle." Keiran's breath caught. "What circle?" Charlotte smiled. And it was wrong. Too wide, too old. The berry line. The Holly King always comes for the one who blooms too bright. Chapter 2. The Crown That Bleeds. Keiran didn't sleep. He sat in the living room, wrapped in a moth-bitten blanket, watching the fireplace flicker with unnatural light. The flames burned green now. Charlotte had lit 7 red candles in a circle around the hearth, each one marked with a name he didn't recognize. Elias. Merrin, Thorn, Ash. She said they were ancestors. He didn't ask how she knew. At 3:33 a.m., the house groaned. Not the usual settling of old beams, but something deeper, like breath held too long. Keiran stood, heart hammering, and crept toward the staircase. The wallpaper pulsed beneath his fingertips. He could hear humming from the attic again, but it wasn't Mum's voice. It was layered, male and female, young and ancient. Musical notes, emoji. The crown shall bloom, the blood shall bind. Musical notes, emoji. He climbed. Each step felt longer than the last, stretching like taffy beneath his boots. The air grew thick, sweet with rot. At the top of the stairs the attic door stood ajar. Inside, Mum knelt before a mirror, her nightgown soaked in candle wax. Her eyes were closed, lips moving in silence. Behind her the mirror shimmered. Keiran stepped closer. The reflection didn't match the room. Instead of dusty rafters and cardboard boxes, the mirror showed a forest, dense, snow-laced, and pulsing with red light. A crown of holly hovered in the air, dripping crimson onto the roots below. "Mum?" he whispered. She turned, but her eyes were black. Not bruised, empty. "You broke the circle," she said. "You left. You loved wrong. The crown remembers." Keiran stumbled back. "This is insane." But the mirror pulsed, and then it opened. A hand reached through, long bark-skinned, crowned with thorns. It didn't grab him. It offered the ribbon. The same one Charlotte had found. But now it was fresh, wet. Keiran ran. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, into the garden. The holly bush had grown taller. Its branches scraped the windows. Snow fell in slow motion, each flake shaped like a face. Charlotte stood in the garden, barefoot, arms outstretched. "You have to wear it," she said. "The crown only blooms for blood, and you're the brightest berry." Keiran shook his head. "I'm not doing this. I'm not your sacrifice." Charlotte smiled. Not a sacrifice, a coronation. Behind her the woods opened, and the carolers began to sing. Musical notes, emoji. O come, the holly king, with crown of thorn and winter wing. Musical notes, emoji. He backed away, slipping on the ice-slick patio. The garden had changed, longer, deeper, as if the woods had crept closer in the night. The holly bush now towered over the shed, its branches twitching like antennae. Somewhere in the distance, bells rang. Not church bells. Something older, hollow. Charlotte stepped forward, her breath fogging in the air. "You don't understand. It's not just you. It's the whole town. Every 25 years the crown chooses. And this time it wants someone who remembers." Keiran's voice cracked. "Remembers what?" Charlotte tilted her head. "The boy in the well, the one who wore red, the one who kissed you behind the church." Keiran froze. He hadn't spoken of Jamie in years. Not since the accident. Not since the town buried it in silence. Jamie had vanished one Christmas Eve, and Keiran had been blamed. Quietly, cruelly. Too soft, they'd said, too strange. The vicar had called it a test of faith. His mother had burned the scarf Jamie left behind. Charlotte stepped closer. "He's in the crown now. They all are. And they want you to finish the bloom." Keiran turned and ran. He didn't know where he was going, just away. Through the garden, past the gate, into the woods. The snow swallowed sound. The trees leaned in. Red ribbons fluttered from every branch, tied in loops, some fresh, some rotted. He tripped over a root and landed hard, cheek pressed to the frozen earth. The ground pulsed. Beneath the frost, something moved. A heartbeat, a rhythm. Musical notes, emoji. Brightest berry, thorn and flame. Wear the crown and speak his name. Musical notes, emoji. Keiran screamed, but the woods didn't echo. They listened. Chapter 3. The Blooming Ground. Set in Vinters Park, Nature Reserve, Maidstone. The snow had stopped. Keiran lay in the underbrush, breath shallow, heart pounding like hooves on frozen earth. The woods around him were quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the soft, rhythmic pulse beneath the soil, like something ancient dreaming below. Vinters Park had never looked like this. He remembered it from childhood, the winding trails, the duck pond, the old stone bridge where Charlotte used to feed swans. But now the trees were taller, twisted, their bark slick with frost and something darker. Red ribbons hung from every branch, fluttering without wind. Some were fresh, some were frayed. One had a name stitched into it, Jamie. Keiran staggered to his feet. His coat was torn, scarf half frozen to his neck. The holly crown, he hadn't noticed it before, was resting on his head. He tried to pull it off, but the thorns bit deep. Blood bloomed across his scalp, warm against the cold. He screamed. The woods didn't echo. They absorbed. Ahead, the trail forked, left toward the pond, right toward the ruins of Winter's mansion. He remembered the stories, how the house had burned down in the 1950s, how the land was cursed, how children saw lights in the trees. He dismissed it all as folklore. But now the air itself felt heavy with memory. He chose the ruins. Each step felt like a ritual. The snow crunched beneath him, but the sound was wrong, wet, like footsteps in meat. The trees leaned closer. Red berries burst from the holly bushes, staining the snow like wounds. Then he saw it. A clearing. Circular. Perfect. At its center stood an altar, stone, cracked, covered in moss and wax. Candles burned in a ring around it, red and green, flickering without flame. And on the altar lay a book, bound in bark, written in blood. Charlotte was already there. She stood beside the altar, her coat gone, her skin pale as frost. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. "You came," she said. Keiran stepped back. "What is this?" Charlotte gestured to the book. "The Chronicle of Crowns. Every Holly King. Every bloom. Every blood." Keiran shook his head. "I'm not part of this?" Charlotte didn't move. "You already are. You wore the crown. You bled. You remembered Jamie." Keiran's voice cracked. "He's dead." Charlotte nodded. "And so were you. Until tonight." The book opened. Pages turned on their own, revealing sketches. Boys crowned in holly, girls drowned in snow, families kneeling before altars. One page showed Keiran himself, drawn in charcoal, eyes hollow, crown blooming. He fell to his knees. "I didn't choose this," he whispered. Charlotte knelt beside him. "None of us do. But we can shape it. We can bloom differently." Keiran looked up. "How?" Charlotte smiled. "You speak his name. You wear the crown. You walk the blooming ground." Behind her the trees parted. A path opened, lined with candles, red ribbons and bones. Keiran stood. He walked. The path opened like a wound. Keiran stepped into it, the holly crown still biting into his scalp. Blood trickled down his temple, warm against the winter air. Charlotte didn't follow. She simply watched, her pale face framed by frost and firelight, as if she were already part of the woods. The candles lining the path flickered green. Keiran walked. Winter's Park had always felt liminal, half wild, half domesticated. But now it was something else entirely. The trees were taller, their branches clawing the sky. The snow had turned grey, streaked with ash. Red ribbons fluttered from every branch, some tied in boughs, others knotted like nooses. Each one bore a name. Some he recognized. Some he didn't. "Jamie," he whispered, touching one. It pulsed beneath his fingers. He kept walking. The trail curved past the old pond, now frozen solid. Beneath the ice, shapes moved. Slow, deliberate. Faces, hands. A boy in a red scarf drifted just below the surface, eyes open, mouth parted in silent song. Keiran staggered back. He remembered that scarf. He'd given it to Jamie the night they kissed behind the church, wrapped it around his neck with trembling hands. Jamie had smiled, said, "Now I'll never forget you." And then he'd vanished. The town had buried it. The vicar had called it a tragedy. His mother had burned the scarf. No one had asked Keiran what he saw. Now Jamie was here. Keiran knelt beside the pond, breath fogging the ice. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know how to fight them." The ice cracked. A voice rose from the depths, not Jamie's, but something older, layered like wind through bone. Musical notes emoji. Brightest berry, thorn and flame, wear the crown and speak his name. Musical notes emoji. Keiran stood. He walked. The trail narrowed, flanked by holly bushes grown wild. Their leaves were sharp, glistening with frost and blood. Berries burst like blisters. The air smelled of iron and pine. Ahead, the ruins of Vinter's mansion loomed, just a few crumbled walls and a staircase leading nowhere. But tonight it was lit from within. Candles burned in every window. Keiran stepped through the threshold. Inside, the air shifted, warmer, older. The walls pulsed with memory. Portraits hung crooked on the stone. Boys and girls crowned in holly, their eyes scratched out. At the center of the room stood a throne. Twisted wood, red velvet, holly branches woven into the arms. And seated upon it, the Holly King. He was not human. His body was bark and bone, his face a mask of thorns. Red berries glowed in his eye sockets. His crown bloomed with fresh holly, dripping crimson onto his shoulders. He did not speak. He simply raised one hand, and the room darkened. Keiran couldn't move. The Holly King gestured, and the portraits came alive. Each figure stepped from its frame, surrounding Keiran in a circle. They were young, pale, hollow-eyed. Some wore ribbons. Some wore scars. One wore Jamie's face. Keiran gasped. Jamie stepped forward. "You left," he said. "You forgot." Keiran shook his head. "I tried to remember. I tried to survive." Jamie touched the crown. "Then wear it fully. Speak the names. Finish the bloom." The Holly King stood. He towered over Keiran, his body creaking like old trees. He held out a branch, twisted, sharp, dripping with wax. At its tip hung a ribbon. Blank. Keiran took it. The room shifted. Suddenly he was outside again, standing in the center of the clearing. Charlotte was gone. The altar was gone. The woods were silent. He held the ribbon in his hand. He spoke. "Jamie." The ribbon flared red. He spoke again. "Elias, Merrin, Thorn, Ash." Each name lit a candle. The crown pulsed. The woods groaned. And then he remembered. Not just Jamie. Not just the kiss. But everything. The way the town had looked at him. The way the vicar had whispered. The way his mother had scrubbed the walls after he cried. The way Charlotte had watched, silent, absorbing it all. He remembered the boy in the well. The girl in the snow. The child who danced with ribbons and was never seen again. He remembered the bloom. The Holly King stepped forward. "You are the brightest berry," he said. "You are the break in the circle. You are the bloom." Keiran knelt, not in submission, in defiance. "I remember," he said, "and I will not forget again." The crown flared. The woods screamed. And then silence. The woods did not return to silence. They held their breath. Keiran stood in the clearing, the holly crown pulsing against his scalp. The ribbon in his hand had turned crimson, its threads twitching like veins. Around him the candles flared, green, red, and gold, casting shadows that danced like old ghosts. The Holly King watched. He did not speak. He did not move, but the air around him thickened, like syrup in winter, and Keiran felt it pressing against his ribs. The portraits had vanished. Jamie was gone. Charlotte was nowhere to be seen. He was alone, except he wasn't. The woods began to whisper, not in words, but in memory. The trees shimmered, and suddenly Keiran was standing in a different clearing. The snow was gone. The air was warm. Summer. A boy stood before him barefoot, crowned in holly. His eyes were wide, his hands trembling. "I don't want to," the boy said. A woman stepped forward, tall, stern, wrapped in velvet. "You must. The town needs bloom. The woods need blood." Keiran recognized her. His grandmother. He gasped. The boy turned. It was his uncle, Elias Berry. The one who'd vanished in 1975. The one no one spoke of. The one whose name Charlotte had stitched into a candle. "I loved him," Elias whispered, "and they buried him beneath the pond." The vision shattered. Keiran fell to his knees. The Holly King stepped forward. "You are not the first," he said, "but you may be the last." Keiran looked up. "Why me?" The Holly King tilted his head. "Because you remember. Because you bloom wrong. Because you love in ways the town cannot bury." Keiran stood. "I won't be your sacrifice." The Holly King smiled. "Then be my heir." The crown flared. Suddenly Keiran was back in the clearing, but it had changed. The altar was now a throne. The candles had grown into trees. The snow was red, and Charlotte stood beside him, her eyes glowing green. "You're almost ready," she said. Keiran turned. "What are you?" Charlotte smiled. "The witness, the seed, the one who remembers when you forget." She held out a ribbon. It bore his name. Keiran Berry. He took it. The woods groaned. And then he bloomed. Not in blood, not in fire, but in memory. He saw every Holly King, every coronation, every boy who kissed wrong, every girl who danced too freely, every child who vanished in snow. He saw the town's rituals, the red candles, the green flames, the songs sung in cellars. He saw the vicar's hands. He saw his mother's tears. He saw Jamie's smile. He saw himself. And he chose. "I will not forget," he said. The crown flared. The woods screamed. And then silence. Keiran woke beneath the holly bush. It was morning. Vinters Park was quiet, normal. The snow was white again. The pond was still. The ruins were just ruins. Charlotte sat beside him, sipping tea from a thermos. "You did it," she said. Keiran touched his head. The crown was gone, but the scar remained. "What happens now?" he asked. Charlotte smiled. "Now you remember, and you make sure they do too." Keiran stood. The woods watched, and somewhere beneath the ice, Jamie smiled. Keiran didn't speak for a long time. He sat beneath the holly bush, watching the snow melt in slow, deliberate patches. The crown was gone, but his scalp still throbbed. The blood had dried in a halo around his hairline, and the ribbon bearing his name lay limp in his coat pocket. It no longer pulsed. It no longer whispered. Charlotte sipped her tea beside him, legs tucked beneath her like a fox in winter. She looked younger now, or older. It was hard to tell. Her eyes had the same glassy sheen as the candles in the clearing. "You saw them?" she said. Keiran nodded. "All of them." Charlotte didn't ask what he meant. She didn't need to. The woods around Vinters Park had returned to their usual shape, paths winding through bramble, the pond still and glassy, the ruins of the mansion just a few crumbled stones. But something lingered, a scent, a hum, a memory. Keiran stood slowly, his knees stiff from kneeling. "We should go." Charlotte didn't move. "You're not done." Keiran turned. "I wore the crown. I spoke the names. I bloomed." Charlotte looked up. "But the town hasn't." That stopped him. He thought of the vicar, of the pub regulars who'd sneered when he wore eyeliner, of the teachers who'd called him distracting, of the neighbours who'd stopped inviting Mum to Christmas drinks after Jamie disappeared. He thought of the silence. "What do I do?" he asked. Charlotte smiled. "You remember, loudly." They walked home through the back lanes, past the old allotments and the boarded-up scout hut. The snow had turned slushy, grey with grit. The holly bushes lining the fences looked ordinary again. No pulsing, no whispering. But Keiran could still feel them watching. The Berry house stood quiet, its windows dark. Mum was asleep, or gone, or somewhere in between. Charlotte didn't check. She went straight to the living room, lit a single red candle, and placed it on the mantel. Keiran watched the flame flicker. "I saw Elias," he said. Charlotte nodded. "I know. He loved someone. A boy." Charlotte didn't flinch. "So did you." Keiran sat on the sofa, the moth-bitten blanket still crumpled from the night before. They crowned him, they buried him, and no one spoke his name again. Charlotte lit a second candle. Until now. The next morning, Keiran walked into town. He wore the same coat, the same scarf, the same blood-stiffened curls. People stared. He didn't care. He walked past the church, past the pub, past the school gates. He stopped at the war memorial and tied a red ribbon to the iron fence. Jamie. He tied another. Elias. Then another. Keiran. The wind picked up. Snow began to fall again. Soft, slow, deliberate. A woman walking her dog paused beside him. She looked at the ribbons, then at his face. She didn't speak, but she didn't look away. Keiran walked on. That night Charlotte brought down the Chronicle, the bark-bound book from the altar. It had followed them home somehow. Or maybe it had always been there. She placed it on the kitchen table, lit 7 candles, and opened it to a blank page. Keiran picked up the pen. He wrote, "Jamie, red scarf, pond. Smile like frost melting. Loved me, Elias, summer bloom, velvet hands. Crowned too young. Loved wrong. Me, Keiran Berry, brightest berry, broke the circle. Remembered." The ink shimmered. The page pulsed. Charlotte turned the page. It was no longer blank. Sketches bloomed, boys and girls, crowned and kneeling, dancing and drowning. But this time their eyes were open. Their mouths were singing. Musical notes, emoji. Brightest berry, thorn and flame, wear the crown and speak his name. Musical notes, emoji. Keiran closed the book. 3 days later the town began to change. Red ribbons appeared on fences. Candles burned in windows. Someone painted a holly crown on the side of the old cinema. The vicar gave a sermon about cycles of memory. The pub served mulled wine with berry sprigs. No one spoke directly, but no one looked away. Keiran walked through it all, silent and crowned. Not with thorns, with memory. But the woods were not done. On the 7th night the snow turned black. Keiran woke to find the garden blooming, holly bushes grown wild, berries bursting, branches twitching. Charlotte stood at the gate, her coat dusted with ash. "It's coming back," she said. Keiran stepped outside. "What is?" Charlotte turned. The next bloom. Chapter 4. The Crown Remembers. The snow had turned black. Keiran stood at the edge of Vinter's Park, staring into the woods that had once crowned him. The holly bushes twitched in the wind, their berries dark as dried blood. The sky above was a bruised grey, and the air smelled of wax and ash. Charlotte stood beside him, her coat buttoned tight, her breath fogging in the cold. "It's starting again," she said. Keiran didn't answer. He could feel it, beneath the soil, beneath his skin. The pulse, the rhythm, the bloom. 7 nights had passed since the coronation. 7 ribbons had been tied. 7 names had been spoken. And now the woods were hungry again. He stepped forward. Vinter's Park had changed. The paths were gone, swallowed by frost and root. The pond was frozen solid, but the ice was cracked in a spiral, like something had clawed its way out. The ruins of the mansion were lit from within, though no fire burned. Charlotte followed him in silence. They reached the clearing. The altar had returned. This time it was covered in holly crowns, dozens of them, stacked like offerings. Each one pulsed faintly, as if remembering the heads they once adorned. Candles burned in a wide circle, their flames green and gold. The Chronicle lay open on the stone. its pages fluttering in windless air. Keiran stepped closer. The book had changed. New pages had bloomed, written in ink and blood, sketched in charcoal and ash, portraits of children, names, dates, ribbons. One page bore his own face, crowned and defiant. Another showed Charlotte, eyes glowing, hands outstretched. And then another face. A boy, pale, wide-eyed, wearing a red scarf. Jamie. Keiran touched the page. It pulsed. Charlotte knelt beside him. "He's not gone," she said. "Not fully." Keiran's voice cracked. "I saw him. In the pond. In the crown." Charlotte nodded. "He's part of the bloom now. But he's waiting." Keiran turned. "For what?" Charlotte looked up. "For you to finish it." They returned home in silence. The Berry house was colder than before. The radiators didn't work. The fireplace flickered green. Mum hadn't spoken since the coronation. She sat in her armchair, eyes closed, humming softly. Musical notes emoji. "Gather round the holly crown. The blood shall bloom. The king shall drown." Musical notes. Emoji. Keiran lit a candle. Red wax dripped onto the windowsill. Charlotte placed the chronicle on the kitchen table, opened to Jamie's page. "We need to speak his name again," she said. "Fully, loudly." Keiran nodded. He picked up the pen. He wrote, "Jamie, red scarf, pond, smile like frost melting, loved me, vanished, remembered." The ink shimmered. The page pulsed. The candle flared. And then the house groaned. Not the usual settling of old beams, but something deeper. Like breath held too long. Like memory waking. Mum opened her eyes. She looked at Keiran, and she spoke. "He wore the crown before you." Keiran froze. Charlotte leaned forward. "Who?" Mum's voice was thin, cracked. "Jamie. They crowned him. In secret. In silence. They said he was too bright. Too soft. Too wrong." Keiran's breath caught. "You knew?" Mum nodded. "I tried to stop it. But the woods were stronger. The town was quieter. They buried him in the pond. And they crowned you next." Keiran stood. The room pulsed. The candle flared. And the snow outside turned red. Keiran didn't speak. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the chronicle. The ink shimmered. The pages pulsed. Jamie's face stared back at him, soft, solemn, crowned in holly. The red scarf fluttered in charcoal wind. His eyes were wide, but not afraid, just waiting. Charlotte lit another candle. The flame burned blue. Mum had gone back to her chair, humming softly, eyes closed. The house groaned around them, as if remembering its own bones. The wallpaper had begun to peel in places, revealing old symbols beneath, circles, thorns, names. Keiran traced one with his finger. "Did they crown him here?" he asked. Charlotte nodded. "In the attic, on Christmas Eve. They said it was tradition." Keiran's throat tightened. He was 17. Charlotte didn't flinch. So was Elias. So were most of them. Keiran stood. He walked to the attic. The stairs creaked beneath him, each step a memory. The door was ajar. Inside, the mirror still shimmered, showing the forest, the altar, the crown. But now there was something else. A figure. Standing in the clearing. Wearing red. Jamie. Keiran stepped closer. The mirror pulsed. Jamie turned. His face was clearer now. Less charcoal, more flesh. His eyes met Keiran's. He smiled. Keiran reached out. The glass was warm. Charlotte appeared behind him. "You can bring him back." Keiran turned. "How?" Charlotte held out a ribbon. It was blank. "You speak his name. You wear the crown. You finish the bloom." Keiran hesitated. "And then what?" Charlotte's voice was soft. "Then the town remembers. Then the silence breaks." Keiran took the ribbon. He tied it around his wrist. The mirror flared. That night the snow returned. But it wasn't black. It was red. Keiran stood in the garden, watching the flakes fall like petals. The holly bush had grown taller, its branches reaching toward the sky. The berries glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with his heart. Charlotte stood beside him, holding the chronicle. "We need to go back," she said. Keiran nodded. They walked. Vinter's Park was waiting. The woods had shifted again, taller, darker, more deliberate. The paths were gone. The pond was frozen, but the ice was clear. Jamie floated beneath it, eyes open, scarf fluttering. The ruins of the mansion burned with green fire. The clearing was alive. Candles burned in a wide circle. The altar was covered in holly crowns. The chronicle lay open, its pages fluttering. The Holly King stood at the center, taller than before, his crown blooming with fresh berries. Keiran stepped forward. The Holly King raised a hand. "You returned," he said. Keiran nodded. "I remember." The Holly King gestured to the altar. Jamie stood beside it. Keiran gasped. He was whole now, flesh and blood, red scarf wrapped tight, eyes wide and wet. He smiled. "You came," Jamie said. Keiran stepped closer. "I never stopped looking." Jamie touched the crown. "Then wear it, one last time." Keiran hesitated. Charlotte placed a hand on his shoulder. "This time you choose." Keiran took the crown. It pulsed in his hands. Warm, wet, alive. He placed it on his head. The thorns bit deep. Blood bloomed. The candles flared. The woods groaned. Jamie stepped forward. He held out a ribbon. Keiran. Keiran took it. He tied it to the altar. The Holly King stepped back. "You are the bloom," he said. "You are the break. You are the memory." Keiran knelt. Not in submission, in defiance. "I remember," he said, "and I will not forget again." The crown flared. The woods screamed. And then, silence. Keiran woke in his bed. The crown was gone. The ribbon was still tied to his wrist. Charlotte sat at the window, watching the snow fall. Mum was humming again, but this time it was a different tune. Musical notes, emoji. O come, the Holly King, with crown of thorn and winter wing. Musical notes, emoji. Keiran stood. He walked to the mirror. Jamie's face was gone. But his name remained, etched in frost. The next morning the town was quiet. Not the usual sleepy quiet of post-Christmas haze, but something deeper. Intentional. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Keiran walked through the high street, the holly crown gone, but the scar still fresh. He wore no hat. Let them see. Let them ask. Let them remember. Red ribbons fluttered from lampposts. Someone had chalked a holly wreath on the pavement outside the bakery. The church doors were open, candles burning in every window. The vicar stood at the threshold, hands folded, eyes downcast. Keiran didn't stop. He walked past the war memorial, past the boarded-up cinema, past the pub where Jamie had once dared to hold his hand. No one spoke, but no one looked away. At the edge of Vinter's Park, he paused. The woods were still. The snow had turned white again, soft and clean. The holly bushes were quiet. The pond was frozen, but the ice was clear. No faces, no ribbons, just silence. Charlotte met him at the gate. She held the chronicle in her arms, wrapped in a velvet cloth. "It's changing," she said. Keiran nodded. "So are we." They walked together past the ruins, past the altar, past the place where Jamie had stood. The clearing was empty now. No candles, no crowns, just snow. Keiran knelt. He placed his hand on the earth. It pulsed, but not with hunger, with memory. That night they held a vigil. Not in the church, not in the pub, in the woods. Charlotte lit 7 candles in a circle. Keiran tied 7 ribbons to the trees. Neighbours came, quiet, uncertain, carrying thermoses and blankets. No one spoke at first, but then someone sang. Musical notes, emoji, oh come, the Holly King. Musical notes, emoji. The melody was soft, broken, but it spread. A woman stepped forward. My brother vanished in 1983. They said he ran away, but he left a ribbon. A man followed. My sister danced in the snow. They said she slipped, but she wore a crown. Keiran listened. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The woods were speaking now, and the town was finally listening. Later, Charlotte handed him the chronicle. It had grown heavier. New pages had bloomed. Names, sketches, memories. But this time they weren't written in blood. They were written in ink, in charcoal, in frost, in truth. Keiran opened to the final page. It was blank. He picked up the pen. He wrote, Jamie, loved, remembered, returned. Elias, crowned, buried, bloomed. Keiran, witness. Air, breaker. Charlotte, seed, flame, memory. The ink shimmered. The page pulsed. And then the book closed itself. The next morning the snow melted. Not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly, deliberately. The holly bushes shed their berries. The pond thawed, the ruins crumbled further, but the clearing remained. Keiran stood at its edge. He didn't wear the crown. He didn't need to. Charlotte joined him, her coat dusted with frost. It's done, she said. Keiran nodded. For now. She looked up. Do you think it'll come back? Keiran smiled. If it does, we'll be ready. Chapter 5. The Chaos and Fire in Parkwood. It began with smoke. Keiran smelled it before he saw it. Sweet, acrid, ancient. Not the sharp sting of a house fire, but something older. Ritual smoke. Memory smoke. The kind that clung to skin and soul. He stood at the edge of Parkwood, the southern sprawl of Maidstone's green belt, where the trees grew thicker and the paths twisted like veins. Charlotte was beside him, her coat dusted with ash, the chronicle clutched tight in her arms. They're trying to burn it, she said. Keiran didn't ask what. He already knew. Parkwood had always been the town's shadow. Vinters Park was mythic, crowned and haunted. But Parkwood was raw, untamed. The place where secrets were buried, where rituals were hidden, where the Holly King's roots ran deepest. The Berry family had never gone there, not even as children. Mum had called it unsettled ground. Now it was burning. Keiran stepped into the trees. The smoke thickened. Red ribbons fluttered from branches, some scorched, some fresh. Holly bushes twitched in the underbrush, their berries bursting like blisters. The air pulsed with heat and memory. Charlotte followed. They think fire will erase it, she said. The vicar, the council, the old families, they're trying to burn the bloom. Keiran clenched his fists. They can't. Charlotte nodded. But they'll try. They reached the clearing. It was different from Vinters, wider, wilder, ringed with stone and bone. A bonfire roared at its centre, fed by holly crowns, red candles, and pages torn from the chronicle. Figures moved around it, hooded, silent, deliberate. One held a torch, another held a ribbon. Keiran stepped forward. The crowd turned. The vicar stood at the edge of the fire, his robe singed, his eyes wild. This is not tradition, he spat. This is corruption. This is rot. Keiran didn't flinch. This is memory. The vicar raised the torch. It must be cleansed. Charlotte stepped beside Keiran. You crowned him. You buried Jamie. You lit the first fire. The vicar's face twisted. He was wrong. He was dangerous. Keiran stepped into the firelight. So am I. The bonfire flared. The woods groaned. And then chaos. The holly bushes erupted, their branches lashing like whips. The ribbons caught flame, twisting into smoke and song. The ground cracked. The chronicle pulsed in Charlotte's arms, its pages glowing. Keiran raised his voice. Musical notes, emoji. Brightest berry, thorn and flame, wear the crown and speak his name. Musical notes, emoji. The crowd froze. The vicar dropped the torch. Charlotte opened the chronicle. Names spilled into the air. Jamie, Elias, Merrin, Ash. Each one flared like a star burning into the sky. The bonfire shrieked. The woods screamed. And the Holly King rose. He was taller now. Wilder. His crown bloomed with fire and frost. His eyes burned red. His voice was wind and thunder. "You tried to bury me," he said. "You tried to silence the bloom." The vicar fell to his knees. Keiran stepped forward. "I remember," he said, "and I will not forget." The Holly King turned. "You are the heir, the witness, the flame." Keiran nodded. "Then burn with me." The Holly King rose from the fire like a god of ash and memory. His limbs were twisted branches, his ribs a cage of thorns. His crown bloomed with holly and flame, berries bursting like coals. His eyes were twin embers, burning through the smoke. The townspeople fell back, some gasping, some crossing themselves, some simply staring, too stunned to run. Keiran stood his ground. The crown on his head was gone, but the scar remained. The ribbon around his wrist pulsed with heat. The chronicle in Charlotte's arms fluttered open, pages turning in a wind that came from nowhere. The Holly King's voice was not a voice. It was the sound of roots splitting stone, of fire licking bone, of names spoken in the dark. "You buried us?" The vicar trembled. "This is blasphemy." "You crowned us." "I was protecting the town." "You silenced us." "I was preserving tradition." The Holly King stepped forward. The ground cracked beneath his feet. "You were feeding the fire." Keiran raised his voice. "No more." The Holly King turned to him. "You remember." "I do." "You burned." "I did." "You bloomed." Keiran nodded. "And I'm not alone." Charlotte stepped forward, holding the chronicle high. "We are the bloom. We are the break. We are the ones who remember." The pages flared. Names rose from the book. Jamie, Elias, Merrin, Ash, dozens more. Each name became a flame, a ribbon, a face. The clearing filled with ghosts, not pale and hollow, but bright and burning. They stood beside the living, shoulder to shoulder, memory to memory. The townspeople wept. Some fell to their knees. Some reached out to the ghosts, whispering names they hadn't spoken in decades. The vicar turned to run. The Holly King raised a hand. Roots burst from the ground, wrapping around the vicar's legs, dragging him to the earth. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the fire. Keiran stepped forward. "Let him go." The Holly King tilted his head. "Why?" "Because we're not them. We don't bury. We remember." The Holly King paused. Then he opened his hand. The roots receded. The vicar collapsed, sobbing. Keiran turned to the crowd. "This ends tonight. No more crowns in secret. No more ribbons in silence. No more blood in the snow." Charlotte added, "We will bloom in the open. We will speak their names. We will carry them forward." The fire flared one last time. Then it died. The Holly King stepped back into the smoke. The ghosts followed, and the woods were still. Dawn broke over Parkwood. The snow had melted in a perfect circle around the clearing, revealing moss and stone and ash. The altar was gone. The ribbons had burned. But the chronicle remained, resting on the earth, its pages closed. Keiran picked it up. It was warm. Charlotte stood beside him, her face streaked with soot and tears. "Do you think it's over?" Keiran looked at the trees. No, but it's different now. They walked back through the woods. The townspeople followed. No one spoke. But no one looked away. That afternoon Keiran stood in the town square. He wore no crown, no scarf. Just his coat, his scars, and the chronicle in his hands. A crowd had gathered, neighbours, classmates, strangers. Some held candles, some held ribbons. Some just stood waiting. Keiran stepped onto the war memorial. He opened the book. He read, Jamie, red scarf, pond, smile like frost melting. Loved me, vanished, remembered. Elias, summer bloom, velvet hands, crowned too young, loved wrong, buried. Merin, danced in snow, sang too loud, vanished in 1962, remembered in 2025. Ash, wrote poems in the church pews, burned in the vestry, remembered. He looked up. These are not ghosts, these are not curses. These are people, our blood, our bloom. He held up the chronicle. This is our memory, and we will not burn it. The crowd was silent. Then someone stepped forward. A woman in her 60s, wrapped in a green shawl. She tied a red ribbon to the iron fence. Thorn, she said, my sister. She wore the crown in 1979. I was told she drowned, but I saw the holly in her hair. Another voice. My cousin. He vanished in the woods. They said he ran. But he left a candle. Another. My daughter. She danced too freely. They said she was taken. But I found her name in the snow. The square filled with ribbons. The chronicle pulsed. Keiran stepped down from the memorial. He handed the book to a child. Write them, he said, all of them. The child nodded. And the bloom began again. That night, Keiran sat in the attic. The mirror was quiet now. Just glass. No forest, no fire, no Jamie. But the ribbon still pulsed on his wrist. Charlotte sat beside him, legs crossed, candle in hand. Do you miss him? Keiran nodded. Every day. Charlotte leaned her head on his shoulder. He's not gone. Keiran smiled. I know. They sat in silence. Below them the town breathed, and in the woods the holly bushes bloomed. Chapter 6. The Devil in the Holly. Vinters Park had gone quiet. Keiran stood at the northern edge of Maidstone, where the woods curled around the ruins of Vinters' mansion, and the pond shimmered with frost. The chronicle was heavy in his hands. The ribbon around his wrist had turned black. Charlotte stood beside him, her breath fogging in the cold, her eyes fixed on the trees. The Holly King hadn't returned to Vinters. He'd gone south. To Parkwood. Parkwood was different. Where Vinters was mythic, crowned and haunted, Parkwood was raw, untamed, the southern edge of Maidstone, where the trees grew thick and the soil was dark with old secrets. It had always been the town's shadow, the place where rituals were buried, where the bloom was silenced. Charlotte had felt it first. They're trying to burn it, she said. Keiran didn't ask what. He already knew. They crossed the town at dusk. From the quiet lanes of Vinters to the council estates near Parkwood, the air changed. The snow turned grey, the holly bushes grew sparse. The silence thickened. By the time they reached the edge of the woods, smoke was rising. Keiran stepped into the trees. The clearing was wide, ringed with stone and bone. A bonfire roared at its centre, fed by holly crowns, red candles, and pages torn from the chronicle. Figures moved around it, hooded, silent, deliberate. One held a torch, another held a ribbon. Charlotte whispered, They think fire will erase it. Keiran stepped forward. The crowd turned. The vicar stood at the edge of the fire, his robe singed, his eyes wild. This is not tradition, he spat. This is corruption. This is rot. Keiran didn't flinch. This is memory. The vicar raised the torch. It must be cleansed. Charlotte stepped beside Keiran. You crowned Jamie. You buried Elias. You lit the first fire. The vicar's face twisted. They were wrong. Dangerous. Keiran stepped into the firelight. So am I. The bonfire flared. The woods groaned. And then he arrived. The Holly King rose from the flames like a god of ash and thorns. His limbs were twisted branches, his ribs a cage of roots. His crown bloomed with holly and fire. His eyes were hollow now, no longer red but deep, endless pits. The townspeople fell back. The vicar trembled. Keiran stood his ground. You came back. The Holly King tilted his head. You called me. Charlotte whispered, We didn't. The Holly King smiled. You remembered. That's enough. Keiran held up the chronicle. The town is changing. The bloom is spreading. We're not afraid any more. The Holly King stepped closer. But they are. Keiran frowned. Who? The ones who built the silence. The ones who crowned in secret. The ones who buried the bloom. Charlotte's voice cracked. The vicar, the council, the old families. The Holly King nodded. And the church. Keiran's breath caught. You were part of it. The Holly King's smile faded. I was their weapon, their ritual, their scapegoat, but I was never theirs. Keiran stepped back. Then whose were you? The Holly King raised his hands. The trees groaned. The snow turned black. And the sky split. I was his. Keiran froze. Who? The Holly King's voice was wind and thunder. The one they fear, the one they blame, the one they name in whispers and sermons, the one who wears horns and flame. Charlotte gasped. The devil. The Holly King nodded. I worshipped him, not in cruelty, not in blood, in defiance, in bloom, in memory. Keiran trembled. Why? The Holly King stepped closer. Because he remembered the forgotten, because he crowned the wrong, because he danced with the buried and sang with the silenced. Charlotte whispered, He loved the queer, the wild, the broken. The Holly King smiled. He did. The bonfire shrieked. The chronicle pulsed. And the woods of Parkwood screamed. But Keiran didn't run. He stepped forward. I remember, he said, and I will not forget. The Holly King turned. You are the air, the witness, the flame. Keiran nodded. Then burn with me. The bonfire hissed as snow turned to steam. Keiran stood in the clearing, the Holly King towering before him, crowned in thorns and flame. The trees around Parkwood groaned, their branches twitching like nerves. The townspeople had fallen silent. Even the vicar, still kneeling in ash, dared not speak. Charlotte stepped closer, her voice steady. You worship the devil? The Holly King's smile was slow, deliberate. I do. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman clutched her child. A man crossed himself. But no one ran. Keiran didn't flinch. Why? The Holly King turned to him. Because he remembers the forgotten. Because he crowns the wrong. Because he dances with the buried and sings with the silenced. Charlotte's voice cracked. They said he was evil. The Holly King's eyes burned. They said you were too. Keiran felt the words like a blade. He remembered the whispers, the sermons, the way the town had looked at him after Jamie vanished, the way his mother had scrubbed the walls, the way the vicar had said, some blooms are unnatural. He remembered the silence. The Holly King stepped forward. He is not evil. He is memory. He is defiance. He is the bloom they tried to bury. Keiran's voice was quiet. He is queer. The Holly King nodded. And so are you. The bonfire flared. The chronicle pulsed in Charlotte's arms, its pages fluttering in windless air. Names spilled into the clearing. Jamie, Elias, Merrin, Ash. Each one became a flame, a ribbon, a face. The ghosts returned, not pale and hollow, but bright and burning. They stood beside the living, shoulder to shoulder, memory to memory. The Holly King raised his arms. I was crowned in secret. I was buried in silence. I was named a curse, but I was never theirs. He turned to the crowd. I was his. The vicar trembled. You were a lie. The Holly King's voice was thunder. I was truth. Keiran stepped forward. You were ours. The woods groaned. The snow turned black, and the sky split. A figure rose from the fire, not monstrous, not cruel, just tall, proud, crowned in antlers and ash. His eyes were stars, his smile was flame, the devil. He stood beside the Holly King. He looked at Keiran, and he bowed. Keiran gasped. Charlotte whispered, He's not what they said. The devil spoke. His voice was wind and warmth. I am the one they feared, the one they blamed, the one they buried beneath sermons and salt. But I am not their monster. He stepped closer. I am the keeper of memory, the crown of the wrong, the bloom of the silenced. He touched Keiran's wrist. The ribbon flared. You are mine. Keiran didn't pull away. He looked into the devil's eyes. And he saw Jamie, smiling. The bonfire shrieked. The chronicle opened. A new page bloomed. Keiran Berry, crowned, broken, remembered, reclaimed. The devil turned to the crowd. You buried your brightest. You crowned in secret. You burned your bloom. He raised his hands. But they returned. The ghost sang. Musical notes emoji. Brightest berry, thorn and flame, wear the crown and speak his name. Musical notes emoji. The townspeople wept. Some fell to their knees. Some reached out to the ghosts, whispering names they hadn't spoken in decades. The vicar stood. He looked at Keiran. I was wrong. Keiran nodded. You were. The vicar bowed his head. I'm sorry. Keiran stepped forward. He placed a ribbon in the vicar's hand. Jamie. The vicar tied it to the altar. The fire flared. And then died. Dawn broke over Parkwood. The snow had melted in a perfect circle around the clearing, revealing moss and stone and ash. The altar was gone. The ribbons had burned. But the chronicle remained, resting on the earth, its pages closed. Keiran picked it up. It was warm. Charlotte stood beside him, her face streaked with soot and tears. Do you think it's over? Keiran looked at the trees. No, but it's different now. They walked back through the woods. The townspeople followed. No one spoke. But no one looked away. That afternoon Keiran stood in the town square. He wore no crown, no scarf. Just his coat, his scars, and the chronicle in his hands. A crowd had gathered, neighbours, classmates, strangers. Some held candles, some held ribbons. Some just stood waiting. Keiran stepped onto the war memorial. He opened the book. He read, Jamie, red scarf, pond, smile like frost melting. Loved me, vanished, remembered. Elias, summer bloom, velvet hands, crowned too young, loved wrong, buried. Merin, danced in snow, sang too loud, vanished in 1962, remembered in 2025. Ash, wrote poems in the church pews, burned in the vestry, remembered. He looked up. These are not ghosts, these are not curses. These are people, our blood, our bloom. He held up the chronicle. This is our memory, and we will not burn it. The crowd was silent. Then someone stepped forward. A woman in her 60s, wrapped in a green shawl. She tied a red ribbon to the iron fence. Thorn, she said, my sister. She wore the crown in 1979. I was told she drowned, but I saw the holly in her hair. Another voice. My cousin. He vanished in the woods. They said he ran. But he left a candle. Another. My daughter. She danced too freely. They said she was taken. But I found her name in the snow. The square filled with ribbons. The chronicle pulsed. Keiran stepped down from the memorial. He handed the book to a child. Write them, he said, all of them. The child nodded. And the bloom began again. That night, Keiran sat in the attic. The mirror was quiet now. Just glass. No forest, no fire, no Jamie. But the ribbon still pulsed on his wrist. Charlotte sat beside him, legs crossed, candle in hand. Do you miss him? Keiran nodded. Every day. Charlotte leaned her head on his shoulder. He's not gone. Keiran smiled. I know. They sat in silence. Below them the town breathed. And in the woods the holly bushes bloomed. Chapter 7. The ribbon around her throat. The fire had died. Parkwood was quiet now. Too quiet. The Holly King had vanished into smoke. The devil into shadow. The townspeople had dispersed, some weeping, some whispering, some tying ribbons to trees, as if it would protect them. Keiran and Charlotte stood at the edge of the clearing, the chronicle clutched between them, the air still thick with ash and memory. We should go, Charlotte said. Keiran nodded. They turned north, toward Maidstone's town centre, toward home. The walk was long. Parkwood sat at the southern edge of town, its trees tangled and wild. Vinters Park was far to the north, quiet and mythic. Between them stretched the town, terraced houses, shuttered shops, the river winding like a vein through the centre. Keiran felt every step. The snow had melted in patches, revealing ribbons tied to fences, candles burned to stubs. Some windows bore holly wreaths, others had been blacked out entirely. The town was split, not in geography, but in belief. Some had embraced the bloom, others had turned to fire. Charlotte walked beside him, silent, her eyes scanning every doorway. They're afraid, she said. Keiran nodded. They should be. They passed the church. The doors were closed now. The vicar was gone. A single red ribbon fluttered from the bell tower, tied in a perfect bow. Jamie. Keiran touched it. It pulsed. As they reached the high street, the air changed. It was colder here, still, the kind of cold that didn't come from weather, but from something deeper, something watching. Charlotte stopped. Do you hear that? Keiran listened. A hum, low, rhythmic, familiar. Musical notes, emoji. Gather round the holly crown, the blood shall bloom, the king shall drown. Musical notes, emoji. His breath caught. That's Mum's song. Charlotte's face went pale. They ran. The Berry house was dark. The windows were shuttered. The holly bush by the gate had been stripped bare. The front door was open just slightly, creaking in the wind. Keiran pushed it wide. Inside, the candles were gone. The fireplace was cold. The armchair was empty. Mum? He called. No answer. Charlotte stepped into the kitchen. The chronicle lay open on the table. A new page had bloomed. Margaret Berry. Chosen. Silent. Sacrifice. Keiran staggered back. No. Charlotte touched the page. It pulsed. She's been taken. Keiran's voice cracked. Where? Charlotte turned. The town centre. They ran. Through the winding lanes, past the war memorial, past the pub where Jamie had once held Keiran's hand. The square was lit with green fire. Candles burned in a wide circle. At the centre stood an altar. And on it, Margaret Berry. She was kneeling, her hands bound with red ribbon, her throat bare. Her eyes were closed. Her lips moved in silence. The Holly King stood behind her. Crowned, watching. Keiran screamed. No. The crowd turned. Some gasped, some wept, some simply watched. Charlotte pushed through them, the chronicle clutched tight. She's not yours. The Holly King tilted his head. She was chosen. Keiran stepped forward. She is mine. The Holly King raised a hand. The altar pulsed. The ribbons tightened. Charlotte opened the chronicle. She tore the page. The fire flared. The Holly King screamed, and Margaret Berry opened her eyes. The altar cracked. The ribbons burned. The Holly King staggered back, his crown wilting, his eyes hollow. Keiran caught his mother as she fell. The town square had been transformed. Where once stood the war memorial and the faded bunting of last year's jubilee, now there was only ritual. Red candles burned in a wide circle, their flames flickering green. Holly bushes had been uprooted from every corner of Maidstone, ripped from gardens, parks, even the churchyard, and dragged here, their branches twisted into a shape older than Scripture. At the centre of it all lay the pentagram. It was vast, spanning the entire cobbled heart of the square. 5 points carved into the stone with blades of holly, each thorn dipped in blood. The lines connecting them were slick and dark, pulsing faintly. Not fresh blood, ritual blood, memory blood, the kind that had been spilled before. Charlotte gasped. Keiran froze. The pentagram was alive. It breathed. At its centre knelt Margaret Berry. She was bound with red ribbon, her hands tied behind her back, her throat bare. Her eyes were closed, lips moving in silence. Not prayer, not fear. Something deeper, something older. The Holly King stood behind her, crowned, watching. His eyes were hollow now, no longer burning, but deep and endless. His crown had grown, thorns twisting into antlers, berries bursting like blisters. He held no blade. He didn't need one. The pentagram would do the work. Keiran stepped forward. The crowd parted. Some gasped, some wept, some simply watched. Charlotte clutched the chronicle to her chest. We have to stop it. Keiran nodded. But the air was thick. The pentagram pulsed. The holly branches twitched, and the blood began to sing. Musical notes emoji. Gather round the holly crown, the blood shall bloom, the king shall drown. Musical notes. Emoji. Keiran stepped into the circle. The holly thorns bit at his boots. The blood hissed beneath him. The pentagram didn't want him there. It recognized him. It remembered him. He was the break. The bloom. The air. The Holly King raised a hand. You cannot stop this. Keiran's voice cracked. She's my mother. She is the seed, the silence, the one who crowned and buried. Charlotte stepped forward. She tried to protect us. The Holly King tilted his head. She tried to forget. Keiran knelt beside the pentagram. He touched one of the holly branches. It pulsed. He saw visions. Elias crowned in summer, Jamie drowned in frost, ash burned in the vestry. He saw Margaret scrubbing the walls, burning the scarf, whispering prayers to a God who never answered. He saw her kneeling. He saw her chosen. He saw her sacrificed. No, he whispered. Charlotte opened the chronicle. She flipped to Margaret's page. It had changed. Margaret Berry, chosen, silent, sacrifice, witness. Keiran gasped. Witness? Charlotte nodded. She's not the offering. She's the mirror. The Holly King stepped forward. She must bleed. Keiran stood. Then so must I. The pentagram flared. The holly branches twisted. The blood hissed. Keiran stepped into the centre. He untied the ribbon from his wrist. He placed it on the stone. It pulsed. The Holly King raised his arms. You would take her place? Keiran nodded. I would break the cycle. Charlotte opened the chronicle. She tore the page. The fire flared. The Holly King screamed. And Margaret Berry opened her eyes. The pentagram cracked. The holly branches withered. The blood turned to ash. The Holly King staggered back, his crown wilting, his eyes hollow. Keiran caught his mother as she fell. She was cold, but breathing. Charlotte dropped the torn page into the fire. The chronicle pulsed, and then closed. The crowd was silent. The Holly King vanished. The candles died, and the snow began to fall. Soft, white, clean. Chapter 8. All Hail the New Holly King. The snow did not stop. It fell in silence, blanketing the town square in white, softening the bloodstains, the cracked altar, the scorched holly branches. The pentagram had collapsed into ash. The candles had guttered out. The crowd had scattered, leaving only footprints and silence. Keiran knelt in the centre of it all, cradling his mother's body. Margaret Berry was still. Her eyes were closed, her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to sing. Her hands, once bound in red ribbon, now lay limp at her sides. The blood on her throat had dried in a perfect line, like a necklace of rust. Charlotte stood behind him, her face streaked with soot and tears. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The chronicle was open in her hands, its pages fluttering in the wind. Keiran pressed his forehead to his mother's. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You weren't supposed to pay the price." The wind stirred. The holly bushes trembled, and the woods began to whisper. Musical notes emoji, brightest berry, thorn and flame, musical notes emoji. Keiran stood. He turned to Charlotte. "I have to finish it." Charlotte's voice cracked. "You already did?" Keiran shook his head. "Not yet." He stepped back into the centre of the pentagram's remains. The snow hissed where his boots touched the ash. The chronicle pulsed. A new page bloomed. Keiran Berry, witness, bloom, heir, king. Charlotte gasped. "No." Keiran looked at her. "I have to." She stepped forward. "You don't. We can bury it. We can burn the book. We can end it." Keiran smiled. Soft, sad. "If we bury it, they'll forget again. If we burn it, they'll rewrite it. But if I wear the crown—" He looked at the sky. "They'll remember." The woods answered. The holly bushes twisted, their branches reaching toward the square. From every corner of Maidstone they came, roots cracking through pavement, vines curling around lampposts, berries blooming in the snow. The town watched. From windows, from doorways, from shadows. They knew. They remembered. Charlotte opened the chronicle. The pages turned on their own, faster and faster, until they stopped on a blank sheet. Keiran stepped forward. He knelt. The holly bushes crowned him. Not gently. The thorns bit deep, drawing blood. The berries burst against his scalp. The crown pulsed with memory. Elias, Jamie, Margaret, all of them blooming in his bones. The snow turned red. The wind howled. And the Holly King was born. He rose slowly. Taller now. Older. His coat had turned to bark and velvet. His hands were thorns and ash. His eyes glowed faintly, green and gold. The crown bloomed wider, its branches stretching like antlers, its berries pulsing with blood. Charlotte fell to her knees. "Keiran?" He looked at her. And smiled. "I'm still here." She reached for him. But her hand passed through his. He was no longer flesh. He was memory. He was myth. He was the bloom. The town gathered. They did not speak. They did not run. They bowed. One by one. Old men who had whispered curses. Children who had tied ribbons. Mothers who had burned scarves. They bowed. Not in fear. In reverence. "All hail," someone whispered. "All hail the new Holly King," another echoed. And then the chant rose. "All hail, all hail, All hail the Holly King. Keiran stood in the centre of it all, crowned, alone, alive in memory. That night the snow stopped. The chronicle closed. Charlotte placed it on the altar, now cracked and cold. She tied a ribbon to the war memorial, green and red, stitched with her brother's name, Keiran Berry. She lit a candle. She sang musical notes, emoji, brightest berry, thorn and flame, musical notes, emoji. And in the woods the holly bushes bloomed. Part 1. The Crown of Ash and Memory. The snow had stopped, but the silence remained. Keiran knelt in the centre of the ruined pentagram, cradling his mother's body as the last embers of the ritual fire hissed into ash. The holly branches had withered. The blood had dried. The altar was cracked and cold. Around him the town square was empty, save for Charlotte, standing just beyond the circle, the chronicle clutched tight to her chest. Margaret Berry's face was peaceful. Too peaceful. Her lips were parted slightly, as if she'd been singing when the final breath left her. Her hands, once bound in red ribbon, now lay limp across her lap. The snow had gathered in her hair like a crown. Keiran pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You weren't supposed to pay the price." Charlotte stepped forward, her boots crunching through the frost. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The chronicle pulsed in her arms, its pages fluttering in windless air. Keiran looked up. The sky was bruised violet, the stars faint and scattered. The holly bushes lining the square had begun to twitch again, their branches reaching toward the centre, toward him. Charlotte opened the book. A new page had bloomed. Keiran Berry, witness, bloom, heir, king. He stared at the words. They shimmered. They pulsed. They waited. Charlotte's voice was quiet. "You don't have to do this." Keiran stood. "I do." They buried Margaret beneath the holly bush in the berry garden. Not in the churchyard, not in the cemetery. In the soil she had tended, the roots she had watered, the place she had whispered to herself when no one was listening. Charlotte dug the grave herself, her hands raw and red. Keiran placed the ribbon around her throat, the one she'd worn during the ritual, and tucked it beneath the earth. No priest came. No hymns were sung. Only memory. Only bloom. The town did not speak of the sacrifice. Not openly. Some left candles on the Berry doorstep. Others tied ribbons to the garden gate. A few whispered apologies in passing. But most stayed silent, watching, waiting. The chronicle had closed, but the myth had not. Keiran felt it in his bones. The crown was calling. He returned to Vinters Park at dusk. Charlotte followed, the chronicle wrapped in velvet, her coat dusted with frost. The woods were quiet, not dead, but listening. The pond was frozen again, the ruins of the mansion lit from within. The clearing had changed. No altar. No candles, just snow. And holly. It grew in a perfect circle, taller than before, its branches blooming with red berries and black thorns. At the centre stood a stone. Not carved, not placed, grown. Keiran stepped into the ring. The holly twitched. The stone pulsed. Charlotte opened the chronicle. The pages turned on their own, faster and faster, until they stopped on a blank sheet. Keiran knelt. The holly crowned him. It was not gentle. The branches twisted around his scalp, thorns biting deep, berries bursting against his skin. Blood bloomed across his forehead, down his cheeks into the snow. The crown pulsed with memory. Elias crowned in summer, Jamie drowned in frost, Margaret singing in silence. The woods groaned, the sky split, and the Holly King was born. He rose slowly, taller now, older. His coat had turned to bark and velvet. His hands were thorns and ash. His eyes glowed faintly, green and gold. The crown bloomed wider, its branches stretching like antlers, its berries pulsing with blood. Charlotte fell to her knees. "Keiran?" He looked at her and smiled. "I'm still here." She reached for him, but her hand passed through his. He was no longer flesh. He was memory. He was myth. He was the bloom. Part 2. The Rain Begins. The crown did not rest easily. Keiran stood in the clearing at Vinters Park, the holly crown blooming across his scalp, thorns biting deep, berries pulsing with memory. His body was no longer his own. Bark crept across his skin, velvet threaded through his coat. His breath fogged green, his eyes glowed gold. He was not dead, but he was no longer alive. He was the Holly King. The woods bowed to him. The holly bushes leaned inward, their branches twitching in rhythm with his pulse. The pond shimmered with frost, its surface etched with names: Jamie, Elias, Margaret, Ash. The ruins of the mansion pulsed with candlelight, though no flame burned. Keiran walked the blooming ground. Each step left a print of red snow. Charlotte followed at a distance. She carried the chronicle now, wrapped in velvet, its pages sealed. Her boots crunched through frost and ash. Her coat was too thin, her grief too fresh, but she walked anyway. She was the witness, the keeper, the last of the living. The town did not sleep that night. Windows flickered with candlelight. Ribbons were tied to gates and fences. Some sang, some wept, some simply watched the sky, waiting for a sign. They had crowned him. They had buried her. Now they waited. What would the Holly King do? Keiran stood at the edge of the berry garden. The holly bush had grown taller, its branches reaching toward the stars. Beneath it lay Margaret, wrapped in red velvet, her ribbon tucked beneath the soil. The snow had melted around her grave, revealing moss and stone and memory. Keiran knelt. He placed his hand on the earth. It pulsed. Charlotte watched from the gate. "She loved you," she said. Keiran didn't speak. He couldn't. His voice was no longer his own. It belonged to the woods, to the bloom, to the myth. At dawn the town gathered. Not in the church, not in the square, in Vinters Park. They came in silence, children, elders, strangers. Some carried candles, others carried ribbons. A few brought offerings, holly sprigs, berries, pages torn from hymnals. They formed a circle around the clearing, waiting. Keiran stood at the center, crowned, watching. Charlotte stepped forward. She opened the chronicle. She read, "Keiran Berry, witness, bloom, heir, king, crowned in grief, bloomed in blood, remembered in frost." The crowd bowed, not in fear, in reverence. "All hail," someone whispered. "All hail the Holly King," another echoed. And then the chant rose. "All hail, all hail, all hail the Holly King." Keiran raised his hand. The holly bushes bloomed, the snow turned red, and the town remembered. That afternoon Charlotte walked alone. She carried the chronicle beneath her coat, its weight pressing against her ribs. She passed the church, still shuttered, the pub still quiet, the war memorial now wrapped in ribbons. She stopped at the bakery where Jamie had once worked. A red candle burned in the window. She lit another. She whispered his name. She moved on. At the edge of Parkwood, she paused. The pentagram had faded, but the memory remained. The stones still pulsed. The soil still whispered. She knelt beside the cracked altar, placed her hand on the earth, and listened. She heard Margaret's song. Musical notes, emoji. Gather round the holly crown. Musical notes, emoji. She wept. She wrote. Margaret Berry, mother, witness, sacrifice, crowned in silence, remembered in bloom. She closed the book. She walked home. That night the snow returned. Soft, white, clean. But beneath it, The holly bushes bloomed. And in the woods the Holly King watched. Part 3. The Winter of Memory. The first frost came early. By mid-November, Maidstone was cloaked in white. The river slowed to a crawl. The rooftops glittered with ice. The holly bushes bloomed red and wild, their berries pulsing like hearts. No one trimmed them. No one dared. Keiran watched from Vinters Park. He no longer slept. He no longer ate. He no longer bled. His body was bark and velvet, his breath fogged green, his eyes gold and hollow. The crown had grown, thorns twisting into antlers, berries bursting with memory. He walked the blooming ground in silence, each step a ritual. The town had begun to change. Ribbons were tied to every gate. Candles burned in every window. Children whispered his name in schoolyards. Elders left offerings at the edge of the woods, sprigs of holly, scraps of red cloth, pages torn from hymnals. No one spoke of the church any more. The vicar had vanished. The sermons had stopped. Charlotte kept the Chronicle. She carried it beneath her coat, wrapped in velvet, its pages sealed with frost. She wrote every night, names, memories, dreams. She stitched ribbons with trembling hands. She lit candles with shaking breath. She was the last of the living, the last who remembered before the crown. She visited Keiran daily. She never touched him. She couldn't. He was no longer flesh. He was myth. On the first Sunday of Advent, the town gathered in Vinters Park. Not in the church, not in the square. In the clearing. They came in silence, families, strangers, children. Some carried candles, others carried ribbons. A few brought offerings, holly crowns, berries, songs. They formed a circle around the Holly King, waiting. Charlotte stepped forward. She opened the Chronicle. She read, Keiran Berry, witness, bloom, heir, king, crowned in grief, bloomed in blood, remembered in frost. The crowd bowed, not in fear, in reverence. All hail, someone whispered. All hail the Holly King, another echoed. And then the chant rose. All hail, all hail, all hail the Holly King. Keiran raised his hand. The holly bushes bloomed, the snow turned red, and the town remembered. That night Charlotte dreamed of Margaret. She stood in the berry garden, her coat dusted with frost, her hands wrapped in red ribbon. She sang softly, her voice thin and cracked. Musical notes, emoji. Gather round the holly crown. Musical notes, emoji. Charlotte woke in tears. She lit a candle. She wrote, Margaret Berry, mother, witness, sacrifice, crowned in silence, remembered in bloom. She closed the book. She walked to the garden. She placed the candle beneath the holly bush. It burned green. The days grew shorter. The nights grew colder. Keiran walked the woods in silence, his crown pulsing with memory. He saw Jamie in the pond, smiling. He saw Elias in the ruins, dancing. He saw Margaret beneath the holly, singing. He saw himself, young, broken, blooming. He did not speak. He did not cry. He remembered. On the solstice, the town held a vigil. They gathered in Vinters Park, candles in hand, ribbons tied to their wrists. Charlotte stood at the centre, the Chronicle open, her voice steady. She read, Jamie, red scarf, pond, smile like frost melting, loved, vanished, remembered. Elias, summer bloom, velvet hands, crowned too young, loved wrong, buried. Ash, wrote poems in the church pews, burned in the vestry, remembered. Thorn, danced in snow, sang too loud, vanished in 1979, remembered in 2025. She paused. She looked at Keiran. She read, Keiran Berry, witness, bloom, heir, king, crowned in grief, bloomed in blood, remembered in frost. The crowd bowed. The candles flared. The snow turned red. and the Holly King raised his arms. The woods bloomed. Chapter 9. The Riot in Fremlin Walk. It had been a year since the snow turned red. A year since Margaret Berry was crowned and buried. A year since Keiran knelt in the clearing at Vinters Park and rose crowned in thorns and velvet. A year since Charlotte watched her brother vanish into myth. No longer flesh, no longer family, but something older, something dangerous. Now it was December again, and Maidstone was bleeding. Fremlin Walk had changed. The Christmas market was no longer festive. The stalls were draped in red velvet and holly. Candles burned in every window. Ribbons fluttered from lampposts, each stitched with a name. Some were offerings, some were warnings. At the centre of the market stood a new altar. Stone, cracked, crowned in berries. The Holly King's symbol, 5 thorns in a circle, had been carved into the pavement. Children were told it was just decoration, but Charlotte knew better. She had seen the crown bloom. She had felt the thorns bite. She had nearly died beneath them. It had happened in spring. She had returned to Vinters Park, carrying the Chronicle, hoping to speak to Keiran, hoping some part of him still remembered her. But the woods had changed. The holly bushes had grown taller. The pond had turned black. The clearing pulsed with blood. He had stood at the centre, crowned, watching. She had stepped forward. He had raised his hand, and the roots had risen. She remembered the thorns around her throat, the altar beneath her knees, the crowd watching in silence. She remembered the chant. Musical notes Emody. Brightest berry, thorn and flame. Musical notes Emody. She remembered the moment before the blade, and the scream that stopped it. A child, tying a ribbon to the altar. Her name? Charlotte. The woods had paused. The crown had wilted, and she had run. Now she was back. Not to plead, not to mourn, to riot. She stood at the edge of Fremlin Walk, wrapped in a black coat, her hands trembling. Around her dozens gathered, young, old, queer, forgotten. Some wore red scarves, others carried candles. A few held signs. Memory is not obedience. We are not offerings. The Holly King is not our God. Charlotte lit a candle. She placed it on the altar. She spoke. Keiran Berry tried to kill me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She raised the Chronicle. He was my brother. He was the bloom. He was the break. But now he is the blade. She opened the book. She read. Charlotte Berry, witness. Keeper. Survivor, crowned in fire. Escaped in frost. Returned in riot. The crowd cheered. The market trembled. The holly bushes twitched. The riot began with ribbons. They tore them from the lampposts, from the stalls, from the altar. They burned them in piles, the smoke rising like memory. They overturned the candle carts. They shattered the berry wreaths. They sang, musical notes Emody. We bloom wrong. We bloom loud. We bloom alive. Musical notes emoji. Security tried to intervene, but the crowd was too large, too loud, too remembered. Charlotte stood on the altar. She raised the Chronicle. She screamed. No more crowns in secret. No more blood in snow. No more offerings in velvet. She tore the page. Keiran Berry. The wind howled. The holly bushes screamed. And the sky split. He appeared in the smoke. Crowned. Watching. But he did not speak. He did not move. He simply watched. Charlotte stepped forward. I loved you. He blinked. I remembered you. He lowered his head. I survived you. She placed the torn page on the altar. She lit it. It burned green. The riot ended in silence. The crowd dispersed. The altar cracked. The holly bushes withered. And the chronicle closed. That night Charlotte walked alone. She carried the book beneath her coat. She tied a ribbon to the war memorial. Her name, Charlotte. She lit a candle. She sang musical notes, emoji, brightest berry, thorn and flame, musical notes, emoji. And in the woods the holly king wept. The smoke lingered for days. Fremlin Walk had been scrubbed clean by the council. Candles swept away, ribbons torn down, the cracked altar quietly removed under cover of night. But the scent of ash remained. It clung to the cobblestones, to the market stalls, to the breath of every passer-by. Charlotte walked through it like a ghost. She wore her black coat, her boots scuffed from the riot, the chronicle pressed tight against her ribs. Her name still fluttered from the war memorial, stitched in red and green. No one had dared remove it. Some looked away when she passed. Others nodded. A few whispered. She survived him. She burned the page. She remembered. The town was split. There were those who still bowed to the Holly King, who lit candles in their windows, who tied ribbons to their gates, who whispered his name in reverence. And there were those who had begun to resist, quietly, fiercely, with memory stitched into their coats and defiance in their eyes. Charlotte had become their symbol. Not a leader, a wound, a reminder that the crown could turn, that bloom could rot, that memory could bite. She didn't sleep much. The chronicle pulsed at night, its pages fluttering in windless air. New names appeared without ink. Children who vanished in snow, elders who dreamed of thorns, lovers who kissed beneath holly and woke alone. She wrote them down. She stitched their ribbons. She lit their candles. She did not speak of Keiran, not aloud. But she saw him. In the woods, in the frost, in the mirror. Vinters Park had changed. The holly bushes had grown wild, their branches reaching across paths, their berries bursting with blood. The pond was frozen solid, but the ice was black. The ruins of the mansion pulsed with green fire. No one entered any more, not even the faithful. They said the Holly King had gone quiet. They said he was mourning. They said he was waiting. Charlotte knew better. He was watching. One night she returned to the clearing. Alone. The snow was deep, the wind sharp. The holly bushes twitched as she passed, their thorns brushing her coat. The stone altar had reappeared, cracked, cold, crowned in frost. She knelt beside it. She opened the chronicle. She read, Charlotte Berry, witness, keeper, survivor, crowned in fire, escaped in frost, returned in riot. She lit a candle. She placed it on the stone. She whispered, I loved you. The woods groaned. The snow turned red, and the Holly King stepped from the trees. He was taller now, older. His crown bloomed wider, its antlers twisted with ash and bone. His eyes glowed faintly, green and gold, hollow and burning. His coat was velvet and bark. His breath fogged the air in spirals. He did not speak. He did not move. He simply watched. Charlotte stood. She did not flinch. You tried to kill me. The Holly King blinked. You crowned me. He tilted his head. You buried her. His breath caught. You forgot me. He stepped forward. Charlotte raised the chronicle. I remembered. The woods screamed. The holly bushes twisted. The altar cracked. And the snow turned black. Charlotte did not run. She placed the book on the stone. She opened to the final page. It was blank. She picked up the pen. She wrote, Keiran Berry, brother, bloom, king, blade, memory, myth, wound. She closed the book. She turned. She walked away. The Holly King did not follow. He knelt beside the altar. He touched the page. It pulsed. He wept. Chapter 10. The Crown Cracks. The snow came late that year. It waited until the riot's smoke had cleared, until the ribbons had been burned and the altar dismantled. Then, on the first Sunday of Advent, it fell, soft, slow, and silent, a hush over the town, a warning, a shroud. Charlotte watched it from the roof of the old car park above Fremlin Walk, her breath fogging in the cold. Below, the market had reopened. The stalls were smaller now. No holly crowns, no velvet drapery. Just mulled wine, cheap baubles, and the occasional nervous carol. But the altar had not returned, and that was something. She clutched the Chronicle to her chest. Its pages were still. For now. The town was split clean down the middle. On one side, the faithful, those who still lit candles in their windows, who whispered the Holly King's name in reverence, who believed the riot had been a desecration. They called Charlotte a heretic, a traitor, a witch. On the other, the remembered, the ones who had lost someone, the ones who had seen the crown turn, the ones who had tied their own names to the altar and lived. They called Charlotte a survivor, a witness, a flame. And in the middle, the silent, the ones who watched, waiting to see which way the snow would fall. Charlotte didn't care what they called her. She had work to do. She walked the town every night, the Chronicle beneath her coat, a satchel of ribbons at her side. She lit candles on doorsteps. She whispered names into the frost. She stitched memory into fences and gates. She was not trying to save the town. She was trying to remember it. Vinters Park had grown darker. The holly bushes were taller than ever, their branches clawing at the sky. The pond was frozen solid, the ice black and veined with red. The ruins of the mansion had collapsed in on themselves, swallowed by roots and rot. No one went there any more, not even the faithful. They said the Holly King had gone silent. They said he was grieving. They said he was dead. Charlotte knew better. He was fading. She saw him sometimes, in the mirror, in the frost, in the corners of her dreams. He never spoke. He only watched. His crown was smaller now, his eyes dimmer, his breath shallow. The woods no longer bloomed when he passed. The snow no longer turned red. He was unravelling, and he knew it. One night, Charlotte returned to the clearing. She brought no offerings, no candles, no ribbons, only the Chronicle, and a question. She stood at the edge of the circle, the holly bushes twitching in the wind. The altar was cracked and cold. The snow was untouched. "Keiran," she said. The woods groaned. He stepped from the trees, crowned, barefoot, bleeding. His coat hung in tatters. His crown was wilted. His eyes were hollow. Charlotte didn't flinch. "You're dying." He nodded. She stepped closer. "You tried to kill me." He looked away. "You failed." He nodded again. She opened the Chronicle. She read, "Keiran Berry, brother, bloom, king, blade, memory, myth, wound." She looked up. "I don't forgive you." He met her eyes. "I don't hate you." He blinked. "I remember you." He stepped forward. He reached for her. His hand passed through hers. He was no longer flesh. He was memory. He was myth. He was fading. Charlotte knelt beside the altar. She placed the Chronicle on the stone. She opened to the final page. It was still blank. She picked up the pen. She wrote, "The Holly King, crowned in grief, bloomed in blood, broke the silence, burned the bloom, faded in frost." She closed the book. She stood. She looked at him. Let it end. He nodded. He stepped back. He knelt. He placed his crown on the altar. It withered. The berries turned black. The thorns crumbled. The snow turned white. And the Holly King was no more. Charlotte walked home in silence. The Chronicle was warm in her hands. The town was quiet. The candles had gone out. The ribbons had stopped fluttering. The snow fell soft and clean. The snow kept falling, but it no longer stuck. It melted on contact with the ground, soaking into the soil, vanishing into the roots. The holly bushes, once wild and blooming, had begun to wither. Their berries shriveled, their thorns dulled. The red had drained from the town. Something was ending, and everyone felt it. Charlotte stopped writing. The Chronicle sat unopened on her desk, its velvet cover gathering dust. For the first time in a year, no new names had appeared. No ribbons had fluttered loose from fences. No dreams had whispered of the woods. It was as if the town had exhaled, or forgotten how to breathe. She wandered the streets at night as she always had. But now the candles were fewer. The ribbons were faded, the whispers had quieted. Even the faithful had begun to falter. She passed the church. Its doors were open again. The vicar had not returned, but a new priest had taken his place. Young, soft-spoken, with eyes like wet stone. He did not speak of the Holly King. He spoke of forgiveness, of healing, of spring. Charlotte did not go inside. She had her own gospel, and it was written in blood. One morning she found a child waiting on her doorstep. A girl no older than 10, with frost in her hair and a red ribbon tied around her wrist. She held a candle in one hand and a folded scrap of paper in the other. Charlotte opened the door. The girl didn't speak. She handed over the paper. It was a name. My brother. He vanished last winter. They said he ran away, but I saw the holly in his bed. Charlotte knelt. She tied a ribbon around the girl's wrist. She lit the candle. She whispered the name. The girl smiled and ran. That night Charlotte opened the Chronicle. A new page had bloomed. Toby, small hands, big laugh, vanished in frost, remembered in fire. She wrote it down. She stitched the name into a ribbon. She tied it to the gate. And the wind began to howl. Vinter's park groaned. The holly bushes twitched. The pond cracked. The ruins of the mansion flared with green light. And the Holly King stirred. He was not dead. Not yet. But he was hollow. He wandered the woods like a ghost, his crown crumbling, his coat in tatters. His breath fogged the air in broken spirals. His eyes were dim. His voice was gone. But he felt the name. Toby. He remembered the boy. He remembered the bed. He remembered the crown. He wept. Charlotte returned to the clearing. She found him there, kneeling in the snow, his hands buried in the earth. The altar was gone. The holly bushes had receded. The clearing was just a field now, mud and frost and silence. She stood at the edge. He did not look up. She spoke. You're not the only one who remembers. He flinched. She stepped closer. You're not the only one who bleeds. He raised his head. His eyes were gold again. Faint, but burning. She knelt beside him. She opened the Chronicle. She read, Toby, small hands, big laugh, vanished in frost, remembered in fire. He closed his eyes. He whispered, I didn't know. Charlotte nodded. You forgot. He looked at her. I'm sorry. She touched the earth. So am I. The wind shifted. The snow stopped. The holly bushes bloomed. Just for a moment. Just enough. The next day the town woke to find the war memorial wrapped in new ribbons. Names stitched in gold thread. Toby, Ash, Elias, Jamie, Margaret, Charlotte. And at the centre. Keiran Berry, Holly King, Memory, Myth, Brother, Bloom, Wound. No one removed them. No one dared. That night, The chronicle opened itself. Its pages turned in silence. A new chapter bloomed. Blank. Waiting. Charlotte picked up her pen. She wrote, "This is not the end. This is the thaw. The bloom will return. But not in secret, not in silence, not in blood." She closed the book. She lit a candle. She sang. Musical notes. Emoji. We bloom wrong. We bloom loud. We bloom alive. Musical notes emoji. And in the woods, the Holly King listened. The snow fell in silence. No chants. No candles. No ribbons. Just frost on rooftops and ice in the gutters, as if the town itself had gone still. The holly bushes, once wild and blooming, had begun to rot. Their berries shriveled, their thorns dulled. The red drained from Maidstone like blood from a wound. Vinters Park was quiet. The pond was frozen solid, black and veined. The ruins of the mansion had collapsed into itself, swallowed by roots and time. The clearing was no longer sacred, just a field of frost and memory. And the Holly King was fading. Keiran wandered the woods like a ghost. His crown had wilted to bone and ash. His coat hung in tatters. His breath fogged the air in broken spirals. He no longer spoke. He no longer bloomed. He simply watched. Charlotte saw him from a distance. She did not approach. Not yet. The town had begun to forget. Not deliberately, not cruelly, just slowly, quietly, the way frost forgets the shape of a flower. The way grief forgets the sound of a voice. The way memory becomes myth. The candles stopped appearing. The ribbons stopped fluttering. The names stopped blooming. Even the chronicle had gone still. Charlotte kept it wrapped in velvet, tucked beneath her coat, untouched. She walked the streets every night, waiting for a sign, a name, a whisper, but the wind was silent. She lit candles anyway. She tied ribbons anyway. She remembered anyway. One night she returned to the clearing. Alone. The snow was deep. The holly bushes were bare. The altar was cracked and cold. Keiran stood at the edge, his crown crumbling, his eyes dim. Charlotte stepped forward. "You're dying." He blinked. She knelt beside the altar. She opened the chronicle. She read, "Keiran Berry, brother, bloom, king, blade, memory, myth, wound." He flinched. She looked up. "You were supposed to save us." He lowered his head. "You became the thing we feared." He closed his eyes. "You forgot me," he whispered. "I remember now." The wind shifted. The snow stopped. The holly bushes twitched. Just once. Just enough. Charlotte stood. She placed the chronicle on the altar. She opened to the final page. It was blank. She picked up the pen. She wrote, "The Holly King, crowned in grief, bloomed in blood, broke the silence, burned the bloom, faded in frost." She closed the book. She turned. She walked away. Keiran did not follow. He knelt beside the altar. He placed his crown on the stone. It withered. The berries turned black. The thorns crumbled. The snow turned white. And the Holly King was no more. The next morning, the town woke to find Vinters Park quiet. No fire. No bloom. No crown. Just snow. Clean. Soft. Still. Charlotte stood at the edge of the woods. She lit a candle. She tied a ribbon. She whispered, "We remember." The snow melted slowly. Not in warmth, but in grief. It receded from the rooftops, the hedgerows, the war memorial, leaving behind damp ribbons and frostbitten candles. The holly bushes shriveled. Their berries turned black. Their thorns fell like teeth. Vinters Park was no longer sacred. It was just woods now. Charlotte stood at the edge of the clearing, the chronicle pressed to her chest. She hadn't written in days. The pages had stopped blooming. The names had stopped whispering. Even the wind had gone quiet. She stepped forward. The altar was cracked and cold. The pond was still frozen, but the ice was clear. Beneath it she saw nothing. No face, no scarf, no memory. She knelt. She placed the chronicle on the stone. She opened to the final page. It was still blank. The Holly King did not appear. Not at first, but the woods twitched. The holly bushes groaned. And then he stepped from the trees. Barefoot, crowned, fading. His coat was velvet and bark, torn at the edges. His crown had wilted to bone and ash. His eyes were dim, no longer gold, just hollow. He did not speak. He did not bloom. He simply watched. Charlotte stood. "You're dying." He nodded. "You're forgetting." He blinked. "You're not the only one." She opened the chronicle. She read, Keiran Berry, brother, bloom, king, blade, memory, myth, wound. He flinched. She stepped closer. "You were supposed to save us." He lowered his head. "You became the thing we feared." He closed his eyes. "You forgot me," he whispered. "I remember now." She knelt beside the altar. She placed her hand on the stone. It pulsed, not with blood, with frost. She looked up. "I don't want to bury you." He looked at her. "I don't want to bloom again." She opened the chronicle. She wrote, "The Holly King, crowned in grief, bloomed in blood, broke the silence, burned the bloom, faded in frost." She closed the book. She turned. She walked away. He did not follow. He knelt. He placed his crown on the altar. It cracked. The berries turned black. The thorns crumbled. The snow turned white. And the Holly King was no more. The town felt it, not as a scream, as a silence. The candles guttered out. The ribbons fell. The names stopped blooming. Even the faithful bowed their heads. Even the vicar wept. Even the children stopped singing. Charlotte stood at the war memorial. She tied a ribbon. Her name? Charlotte. She lit a candle. She sang. Musical notes. Emoji. We bloom wrong. We bloom loud. We bloom alive. Musical notes emoji. And the wind carried it, not to the woods, to the town, to the gates, to the graves, to the ones who remembered. That night she opened the chronicle. A new page had bloomed. Not a name. A question. What comes next? She stared at it. She picked up her pen. She wrote, "We do." Chapter 11. The Last Ribbon. Spring came late. The frost clung to the gutters until April. The holly bushes bloomed once more, but not red. Pale green berries, soft and trembling, dotted the branches like new eyes. The snow had melted, but the silence remained. Vinters Park was quiet. The altar had collapsed into moss. The pond had thawed, revealing nothing but silt and stone. The ruins of the mansion had sunk into the earth, swallowed by ivy and time. The clearing was no longer sacred, just a scar. Charlotte stood at its edge, the chronicle tucked beneath her coat. She hadn't written in weeks. The pages were still. The wind was still. Even the woods seemed unsure. She stepped forward. The holly bushes twitched. The ground pulsed, and the air shifted. She found him beneath the old oak. Keiran, barefoot, crowned, fading. His coat was bark and velvet, torn at the seams. His crown had shrunk to a circlet of thorns. His eyes were dim, no longer gold, just green and tired. He sat in silence, watching the sky. Charlotte knelt beside him. "You're still here." He nodded. "I thought you were gone." He looked at her. "I tried." She opened the chronicle. She read, Keiran Berry, brother, bloom, king, blade, memory, myth, wound. He flinched. She closed the book. She placed it on the earth. I don't know what comes next. He didn't answer. She looked at him. Do you? He blinked. I think something is waking. That night the wind changed. It came from the south, warm, wet, humming. The holly bushes leaned toward it. The pond rippled, the altar pulsed, and the chronicle opened on its own. A new page bloomed. Not a name. A symbol. 5 thorns in a circle. And beneath it, the crown will rise again. Charlotte stared at it. She picked up her pen. She hesitated. She wrote, Not without me. The next morning she was gone. No note. No ribbon. No candle. Just the chronicle closed and pulsing, left on her desk. And in the woods the Holly King stood tall again, his crown blooming, his eyes gold, his breath fogging the air in spirals. He turned toward the south, toward Park Wood, toward something older, something louder, something waiting, and beneath the war memorial a new ribbon fluttered. Black, stitched in silver. Charlotte Berry, witness. Keeper, flame, missing. The chronicle sat untouched for 7 days. No one dared open it. It pulsed faintly on Charlotte's desk, wrapped in velvet, stitched with frost. The candle beside it had burned down to wax. The window remained cracked, letting in wind and whispers. Her coat still hung on the hook. Her boots were still damp from the last walk. But Charlotte was gone. No note. No ribbon. No blood. Just absence. And the town felt it. They searched Vinters Park first. The holly bushes had begun to bloom again, pale green berries, soft and trembling. The pond was clear. The altar was moss. The ruins of the mansion had collapsed into ivy and silence. No footprints, no scarf, no sign. Then they searched Park Wood, the southern edge of Maidstone where the trees grew thick and the soil was dark with old secrets. The place where the first crowns were buried. The place where the devil once danced. The place Charlotte had feared most. They found nothing. But the wind had changed. It hummed. It remembered. The town grew quiet. Not peaceful. Not healed. Just quiet. The candles returned, but they flickered. The ribbons reappeared, but they frayed. The songs were sung, but they cracked. Children whispered Charlotte's name like a spell. Elders stitched her initials into their coats. The faithful lit green candles and prayed to a crown that no longer answered. And beneath it all the chronicle pulsed. Waiting. Keiran stood at the edge of Park Wood. His crown had regrown, thorns sharp, berries red. His coat was velvet again, stitched with ash and bark. His eyes glowed gold, his breath fogged the air in spirals. He was no longer fading. He was rising. But something was wrong. He felt her absence like a wound. Charlotte, the witness, the flame, the one who remembered. He stepped into the woods. The trees bowed. The holly bushes bloomed. The soil pulsed. And the devil whispered. She had come here. He knew it. He saw the broken branches, the scorched roots, the ribbon tied to a stone. Black, stitched in silver. Her name, her vow. Not without me. He knelt beside it. He placed his hand on the earth. It burned. Not with fire. With memory. He saw her walking, alone, defiant, afraid. He saw her open the chronicle. He saw her write the final page. He saw her step into the woods. And then, nothing. Just silence. Just frost. Just waiting. He returned to the clearing. Vinters Park. The altar. The pond. The ruins. He stood at the center. He raised his arms. He called her name. Charlotte. The woods groaned. The snow turned red. The holly bushes screamed, but she did not come. The chronicle opened. A new page bloomed. Not a name, a map, 5 thorns in a circle, a path through Parkwood, a crown beneath the ash. Keiran stared at it. He picked up the book. He walked. The path was old, buried, twisted. It led past the Devil's Altar, past the burned chapel, past the pond that never froze. The trees grew thicker here, the soil darker, the air heavier, the wind louder. He followed it. He did not speak. He did not bloom. He remembered. At the end of the path he found the stone. Black, cracked, crowned in holly, and beneath it a ribbon. Red, stitched in gold. Charlotte Berry Witness. Keeper, flame. Returning? He knelt. He placed his crown on the stone. He whispered, "I'm sorry." The stone pulsed. The ribbon flared, and the ground split. She rose from the earth, not broken, not buried, changed. Her coat was stitched with roots. Her eyes glowed green. Her breath fogged the air in spirals. She held the chronicle in one hand, a blade of holly in the other. She looked at him. "You crowned me?" He nodded. "You buried me." He wept. "You remembered." She smiled. "I always do." The wood screamed. The snow turned black. The altar cracked. And the devil laughed. They stood together, crowned, blooming, watching, not enemies, not lovers, not siblings, something older, something louder, something waiting. And in the town square, the war memorial split. A new ribbon fluttered, green and red, stitched in silver. The Holly King and the Keeper returned. Remembered, rising. The town did not know what to make of the new ribbon. It appeared overnight, tied to the war memorial with a knot no one could undo. Black silk, stitched in silver thread, fluttering in the wind like a warning. Some said it was a trick. Others said it was a sign. A few whispered that Charlotte had never left, that she had simply gone deeper. But no one dared enter Parkwood. Not any more. Not since the altar cracked. Not since the chronicle closed. Not since the Holly King had vanished again. Charlotte walked the southern woods alone. Or so it seemed. The trees parted for her now. The roots curled away from her boots. The holly bushes leaned in, whispering secrets in a language older than frost. She no longer needed the chronicle to remember. The names bloomed behind her eyes. She had become the book. The witness. The wound. The flame. But something else was blooming inside her now. Something darker. Something louder. Something not entirely hers. She found the Devil's Altar at dusk. It had changed. The stones were slick with moss, but the center pulsed with red light. The pentagram had returned, drawn in fresh holly and something darker than blood. Candles burned without flame. Ribbons hung from the trees like veins. Charlotte stepped into the circle. The air thickened. The ground trembled. And the devil spoke. "You came back." She didn't flinch. "I never left." "You crowned him?" "I tried to save him." "You failed?" She looked up. "So did you?" The devil smiled. "Then let's begin again." In Vinter's Park, Keiran woke with a scream. The crown burned against his scalp. The roots beneath him twisted. The pond boiled. He stood. He staggered. He ran. Through the woods. Through the frost. Through the memory. Toward the south. Toward her. Charlotte stood in the center of the pentagram. The devil circled her, barefoot and grinning, his antlers dripping with wax and ash. His eyes were stars. His voice was thunder. "You remember everything now." She nodded. "You carry the chronicle in your blood." She nodded again. "You are the new altar." She didn't move. "You could burn it all down." She looked at him. "I could." He leaned in. "Will you?" She didn't answer. Keiran burst into the clearing. The candles flared. The holly bushes screamed. The devil turned. "Ah, the king returns." Keiran raised his hand. Charlotte stepped between them. "Don't." Keiran froze. "I thought you were gone." "I was. You died. I changed." He looked at her. "You're not the same." She smiled. "Neither are you." The devil stepped back. He raised his arms. "Shall we begin again?" Charlotte turned to Keiran. "What do you remember?" He looked at the altar. "I remember the crown." He looked at her. "I remember the blade." He looked at the devil. "I remember the fire." Charlotte stepped forward. "And what do you choose?" Keiran closed his eyes. "I don't know." The wind howled. The pentagram flared. The chronicle opened in Charlotte's hands. A new page bloomed. 2 names. Charlotte Berry Keeper. Flame. Altar. Blade. Keiran Berry King. Root. Wound. Seed. And beneath them, the bloom returns. The crown divides. The town will burn or blossom. Charlotte stared at the page. Keiran stepped beside her. The devil laughed. In Maidstone the snow began to fall again. But this time it was red. Not blood, not ash. Berries. Thousands of them. Falling from the sky like rain. Bursting on rooftops. Staining the streets. Blooming in gutters. The town looked up. And remembered. Children screamed. Elders wept. The faithful lit candles. The silent locked their doors. And beneath the war memorial the ribbons caught fire. One by one. Until only one remained. Black, stitched in silver. Charlotte Berry returning. In Parkwood the altar cracked. The devil vanished. The pentagram burned. And Charlotte turned to Keiran. "We can't go back." He nodded. "But we can choose what comes next." He looked at her. "Together?" She held out her hand. "Together." He took it. The woods pulsed. The snow stopped. The chronicle closed. And the crown began to bloom again. But far beneath the roots something stirred. Older than the Holly King. Older than the devil. Older than the chronicle. It opened one eye. It smiled. And it whispered, "Let the next bloom begin." The town held its breath. The red snow had stopped falling, but the stains remained. On rooftops, on fences, on the war memorial, where the last ribbon fluttered in black silk. No one dared remove it. No one dared speak Charlotte's name aloud. But everyone felt her. In the wind. In the frost. In the silence. Vinters Park was sealed. The holly bushes had grown into a wall. Thorns twisted like antlers, berries pulsing faintly in the dark. The pond had frozen over again, but the ice was no longer clear. It shimmered with green light, as if something beneath it was watching. The ruins of the mansion had vanished. Swallowed whole. Only the clearing remained. And even that was changing. Keiran stood at its center. His crown had regrown, thorns sharp, berries bright. His coat was velvet and bark, stitched with ash. His eyes glowed gold. But he did not speak. He did not bloom. He simply waited. For her. For the flame. For the one who remembered. Charlotte had not returned to town. Not fully. She moved through Parkwood like a shadow, barefoot, crowned in frost, the chronicle stitched into her coat. She no longer needed to write. The names bloomed behind her eyes. The ribbons curled around her wrists. The altar pulsed beneath her feet. She was no longer the witness. She was the wound, the blade, the bloom. One night she stood at the edge of Vinters Park. The holly wall parted. The snow hissed. The wind stilled, and Keiran stepped forward. They stared at each other. Brother. King. Keeper. Flame. You changed, he said. So did you. You're not alive. Neither are you. You're not mine. I never was. The wind groaned. The pond cracked. The altar pulsed. And the chronicle opened. A new page bloomed. Not a name. A choice. The crown will divide. The flame will burn. The town will follow. Charlotte read it aloud. Keiran flinched. She looked at him. What do you choose? He didn't answer. She stepped closer. You can end it. He looked at the pond. I don't know how. She touched his hand. You already did. The woods screamed. The holly bushes twisted. The snow turned black. And the devil laughed. He stepped from the trees, barefoot and grinning, his antlers dripping with wax. His eyes were stars. His voice was thunder. You bloomed wrong. Charlotte didn't flinch. You crowned the wound. Keiran didn't move. You remembered too much. They didn't speak. The devil raised his arms. Then let the town burn. But the altar cracked. The pond boiled. The chronicle flared. And Charlotte stepped forward. No? The devil paused. You would stop me. She nodded. You would break the bloom? She raised her hand. I would rewrite it. Keiran stepped beside her. He placed his crown on the altar. It pulsed. The berries turned white. The thorns softened. The snow melted. And the woods went silent. The devil vanished. The chronicle closed. The wind stilled. And the town exhaled. But beneath the war memorial, a new ribbon bloomed. Green and red, stitched in gold. The keeper and the king divided, returned, waiting. Charlotte walked through the town at dawn. No one stopped her. No one bowed. No one spoke. But they lit candles. They tied ribbons. They whispered. She passed the church. The doors were open. She stepped inside. She placed the chronicle on the altar. She lit a candle. She sang. Musical notes. Emoji. We bloom wrong. We bloom loud. We bloom alive. Musical notes emoji. And the flame did not go out. Keiran stood in Vinter's Park, alone, watching, waiting. The holly bushes had receded. The pond was clear. The altar was moss. But the crown still pulsed, and the wind still whispered. That night Charlotte dreamed of a new name. Not hers, not his. Someone else. Someone blooming. Someone burning. She woke in frost. She opened the chronicle. She wrote, The next crown will not be ours. And beneath Park Wood, something stirred. Older than the Holly King. Older than the keeper. Older than the devil. It opened one eye. It smiled. And it whispered, Let the next bloom begin. The red snow had melted, but the stains remained. On rooftops, on fences, on the war memorial. The town tried to scrub them clean, but the colour had sunk into the stone, into the soil, into the skin of the place. Maidstone had always been a town of forgetting, but now it remembered, and remembering hurt. Charlotte walked the streets in silence. She wore no crown, no ribbon, no coat, just a black dress stitched with names. Her boots left no prints in the frost. Her breath fogged the air in spirals. She passed the bakery, the church, the pub. No one stopped her. No one bowed. But they watched. They always watched. She was no longer a girl. She was a warning, a wound, a flame. At the edge of Vinter's Park, the holly bushes had parted. The clearing was open again, but changed. The altar was gone. The pond was still. The ruins had vanished. In their place, a circle of stones, each carved with a name. Not just the crowned, not just the vanished. Everyone, the whole town. Charlotte knelt beside the stone marked Margaret Berry. She placed her hand on it. It pulsed, not with blood, with memory. Keiran stood across the clearing. He had not spoken since the devil vanished. His crown had dulled, his coat had frayed. His eyes were dim, but he was still the Holly King. Still the root, still the wound. He watched her. She did not look up. "I dreamed of you," he said. Charlotte didn't answer. "You were standing in the pond, wearing the crown, holding the chronicle, singing." She traced the letters of their mother's name. "You were on fire," he said. Charlotte stood. "I was always on fire." They walked the edge of the clearing in silence. The holly bushes leaned away from them. The wind held its breath. The stones pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Charlotte stopped. "Do you feel it?" Keiran nodded. "It's not over. No, it's not us anymore." "No." He looked at her. "Then who?" She turned to the woods. "That's what I'm going to find out." That night, the chronicle opened itself. A new page bloomed. Not a name. A question. Who is the next? Charlotte stared at it. She picked up her pen. She wrote, "I don't know, but I'll be watching." Spring came early. The frost melted from the hedgerows. The river began to move again. The holly bushes shed their thorns. The town emerged from its silence, blinking and unsure. Children played in the streets. The church bells rang again. The market reopened. But something had changed. No more crowns. No more offerings. No more ribbons. Just memory and fear. Charlotte moved into the old schoolhouse. She cleared the desks, lit candles in the windows, hung the chronicle on the wall. People came in silence, one by one, name by name. They brought stories, ribbons, ashes. She listened. She wrote. She remembered. She never asked for forgiveness. She never gave it. She only bore witness. Keiran remained in the woods. He no longer crowned. He no longer punished. He simply walked. The holly bushes parted for him. The roots whispered, the stones pulsed. He spoke to no one. But sometimes children swore they saw him at the edge of the trees, watching, waiting, crowned in green. They called him the Hollow King. They left him berries. They sang. Musical notes emoji. Brightest berry, thorn and flame. Musical notes emoji. One morning, Charlotte found a letter on the altar. Folded in red paper. Sealed with wax. No name. Just a symbol. 5 thorns in a circle. She opened it. Inside, a single word. South. She packed the chronicle. She tied her boots. She lit a candle. She walked. Parkwood was darker than before. The trees had grown taller. The paths had shifted. The air was thick with moss and memory. The devil's altar was gone, the pentagram erased. But something else had taken root. A new clearing. A new circle. A new crown. At its center stood a girl. No older than 12. Barefoot. Wrapped in red. Her eyes were closed. Her hands were stained with holly. Charlotte stepped into the circle. The girl opened her eyes. They were gold. "You're early," the girl said. Charlotte blinked. "Who are you?" The girl smiled. "I'm the next." Charlotte stepped closer. "You're just a child." The girl tilted her head. "So were you." Charlotte's breath caught. The chronicle pulsed in her satchel. The girl reached out. "I dreamed of you." Charlotte didn't move. "I saw you in the pond, wearing the crown, holding the book, burning." Charlotte whispered, What do you want? The girl's smile faded. To remember. The wind howled. The holly bushes bloomed. The ground cracked. And the chronicle opened. A new page bloomed. Name, redacted. Age, 12, crowned in spring. Burned in bloom. Remembered in fire. Charlotte stared at the page. The ink was still wet. The name was missing. The story had already begun. She turned to the girl. Do you know what this means? The girl nodded. I'm not afraid. Charlotte knelt. You should be. The girl touched her face. So were you. Far away in Vinters Park, Keiran looked up. The wind had changed. The roots had stirred. The pond had cracked. He felt her. Not Charlotte. The next, he stood. He walked. Charlotte lit a candle. She placed it in the center of the clearing. She tied a ribbon to the girl's wrist. She whispered, Don't let them forget you. The girl smiled. I won't. The chronicle closed. The wind stilled. The woods exhaled, and the bloom began again. But beneath the soil, something deeper stirred. Older than the Holly King. Older than the Keeper. Older than the devil. It opened both eyes. It smiled, and it whispered, Let the crown rot. Let the flame scatter. Let the root split. Let the bloom devour. And in the town square, a new ribbon appeared. White silk, stitched in black, tied to the schoolhouse door. The altar has moved. The bloom is not yours. The cycle is broken. Charlotte stood in the doorway. She read the ribbon. She looked to the woods. She whispered, Then we begin again. The town had begun to breathe again. Spring crept in slowly, green shoots pushing through frost-bitten soil, birds returning to the hedgerows, laughter echoing faintly from the market square. The red snow was gone, but its memory lingered. No one spoke of the Holly King. No one dared mention the devil. But they lit candles, they tied ribbons. They remembered. Charlotte watched from the schoolhouse window. She had turned the old building into a sanctuary of sorts. The desks were cleared. The walls were lined with names. The chronicle sat open on the altar, pulsing faintly with each new entry. People came quietly. They whispered. They wept. They stitched. She did not lead them. She bore witness. Keiran remained in the woods. He no longer crowned. He no longer punished. He simply walked, barefoot, silent, crowned in green. The holly bushes parted for him. The roots whispered, the stones pulsed. He spoke to no one. But sometimes children swore they saw him at dusk, watching from the edge of the trees. They called him the Hollow King. They left him berries. They sang. Musical notes emoji. Brightest berry, thorn and flame. Musical notes emoji. One evening, Charlotte found a ribbon tied to her door. Black silk, stitched in silver. No name. Just a symbol. 5 thorns in a circle. She untied it. She placed it on the altar. The chronicle flared. A new page bloomed. The root is not dead. The altar is not empty. The bloom is not yours. Charlotte stared at the page. She picked up her pen. She wrote, Then whose is it? That night the wind changed. It came from the south, wet, heavy, humming with something older than frost. The holly bushes twitched. The pond rippled. The stones groaned. And beneath Parkwood something stirred. Not the devil. Not the king. Not the keeper. Something else. Charlotte returned to the clearing. The altar was gone. The pond was still. But the soil was warm. Too warm. She knelt. She placed her hand on the earth. It pulsed. Not with memory. With hunger. She opened the chronicle. A new page bloomed. Not a name. A warning. The root remembers. The root hungers. The root will rise. She stared at the words. She whispered, "What did we bury?" Keiran appeared at the edge of the clearing. His crown was wilting. His coat was torn. His eyes were hollow. He stepped forward. "I felt it." Charlotte nodded. "It's waking." He knelt beside her. "We didn't end it." She opened the chronicle. "We only paused it." The wind howled. The holly bushes screamed. The pond cracked. And the soil split. Just a little. Just enough. Charlotte stood. Keiran reached for her. She didn't move. She whispered, "It's not just memory anymore." He looked at her. "It's something else." She nodded. "Something alive." They returned to the schoolhouse. Charlotte placed the chronicle on the altar. She lit a candle. She tied a ribbon. She wrote, "The root is watching. The keeper is ready. The king is waiting." But beneath Park Wood, the soil split wider. A hand emerged. Not human. Not holly. Something older. Something wrong. It curled into a fist. It pulsed. And it whispered, "Let the bloom devour." In the town square, the war memorial cracked. A new ribbon appeared. White silk. Stitched in black. Tied in a knot no one could undo. "The altar has moved. The crown is not yours. The next will not be kind." Charlotte stood at the window. She saw the ribbon. She saw the crack. She saw the children staring. She whispered, "It's starting." Keiran stood in the woods. He felt the pulse. He felt the hunger. He felt the name. Not Charlotte. Not his. Something new. Something blooming. Something burning. He whispered, "I'm not ready." And beneath the soil, the root opened its eyes. It smiled. It reached. It remembered. And it whispered, "Then I'll take everything." This title was narrated with virtual voice.